So welcome to the Thayer Public Library's Coffee with Local Authors. My name's Laurie Kavanaugh. I'll be moderating tonight's panel. I'm the circulation librarian, and I also facilitate the library's monthly writers group. I will introduce our three panelists. We'll have Eugene Coghill, who wrote A Loving Deception, Lisa Braxton, who wrote The Talking Drum, and Paul Yovino, who wrote Portals. These three authors will be our featured authors tonight. They'll each have a chance to talk, and you'll have a chance to ask each of them questions. And then at the end, we'll have a general question and answer session for all three of the authors. So our first speaker tonight is Eugene. So Eugene Coghill's various careers have included the United States Marine Corps, corporate investigator, criminal justice student, and law enforcement. Other non-writing related achievements, let me turn this off. Other non-writing related achievements include being named Driver of the Year with his current employer, completing 2 50-mile ultra marathons, and cycling a century, 100 miles. After over 21 years and 2 million accident-free miles behind the wheel of a tractor trailer, his driving career is making room for his writing pursuits. He's a contributing writer for Faith-Filled Family magazine, and he posts on his blog, Kingdom Living, at eugenecoghill.com. Eugene is the author of a previous novel, Love is a Fishnet, which was published with iUniverse in 2008. His second novel, A Loving Deception, was published this year through Global Summit. So please welcome Eugene Coghill, our first speaker tonight.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and I certainly feel honored that you given me your time. I know you had a choice to be anywhere else on the internet tonight, and you've honored me with your time tonight. I also want to take a moment to thank Laurie Kavanaugh and the Thayer Public Library for facilitating this event. Well, my writing journey actually began as a child. I was in a juvenile home in Maryland. Had gone through a traumatic childhood with some child abuse and things of that nature. And a counselor at this juvenile home actually introduced me to writing as a way of venting out all the feelings of frustration, things that was going on. It was a less intimidating way to communicate and non-threatening. So she planted those seeds in me early. And over the years, those seeds have grown for my desire to write literally 5 books. 2 of them have already written. We're going to talk about one here tonight, and the other 3 are forthcoming. As a matter of fact, they're already half written. I'd like to be able to get those done by the time I depart this world. You know, it's something I want to complete on my bucket list. But as I look at the calendar, realizing that, you know, I'm closer to my grave than I am the cradle, I've had to trade my bucket for a Dixie cup. All right. What you're going to hear about tonight is my vision and what inspired me to write this book. It was a result of my own spiritual life, as a matter of fact, some of the ups and downs that I was having, challenges. I became a Christian, and for some reason, I didn't see any typical change that you would expect the stereotypical Christian to go through. As a matter of fact, I found myself engaging in far more sin and doing some sins that I didn't even think I was even capable of. So I found that to be quite alarming and quite troubling. And as a matter of fact, what I did, I had read the Bible, and I was kind of fascinated with that fact. I'm thinking, wait a minute now, the Word of God, the same God who spoke all of creation, you know, let there be light, let there be people, let there be all of this. It didn't seem to be having an effect on me, and I was getting a little concerned about that. But what I had done while I was at this juvenile home, as a matter of fact, I had read the Bible from cover to cover a couple of times, and I was absolutely fascinated, blown away by what I discovered. It had answered so many of the bigger questions I had about life, about myself, about my own reason here, and it also answered a lot of questions I had about people and, you know, what to expect and the whole plan that God had for all this. I mean, But more importantly, I was fascinated by the stories that I read about the people in the Bible. Some of the people that I idolized, Moses, Abraham, what's his name, David, and so on and so forth. Uh, I read these stories, and at the end of their lives, they transformed into some great people of God. But what really captured my attention was the beginning part of their lives, when they were involved in all kinds of sin, and they looked more like the guy next door, actually more like me. That's what really captured my attention. I mean, think about Moses, a murderer, for heaven's sakes. Yeah, start out a murderer. Then you got Abraham, a habitual liar, for heaven's sakes. These things are written in the Bible. And then there's King David, both an adulterer and a murderer. So I was fascinated how these people who start out with those horrific starting seeds in their lives, how their lives are transformed to something so different. And so that was my passion to find out more about that. That I found to be rather fascinating. The more I read, I kind of found a renewed sense of hope in myself, and found myself more drawn, because I feel my life has been divinely orchestrated. And that's when I knew that my writing was going to literally become a ministry. I figured, I want to be able to bridge the gap. There's some things that other people, surely other Christians must be experiencing this thing, or even other people must be experiencing, like, why is my life in this direction? Will I ever transform to be anything better than what I am? So I realized that what this book was all about, I wanted to highlight a fictional couple, who had the worst of sins that you could think of. I wanted to highlight how God can take the flaws in all of us and create something good, and we're talking a lifetime transformation. Unlike it's not like going to McDonald's, ordering a number 7, and it comes out in 5 minutes. We're talking a lifetime process. And that's what I found in my own self, that, I'm seeing how God has been to take a mess like myself, turn it into a messenger to deliver his message. Okay. The plot itself, it's filled with twists and turns, and it has a few surprise deceptions that I think will catch people by surprise. And I most certainly know that Hollywood would probably be interested in it. I wanted to show that when the world throws us away as hopeless sinners and rejects and basket case, that the eternal word of God, if it's planted in you, it's going to complete its mission. The same word that spoke all this, was powerful enough to speak all of creation into existence, is the same word that's powerful enough to take an adulterer, a murderer, a habitual liar, and transform their lives into something amazing. And that same word can be effective for common folks like you and I. Now, the writing process itself, to be quite honest with you, I didn't do anything conventional that you would hear from the writing community. I didn't write every day. I did not have a specific routine. As a matter of fact, when you spend 12, 13, 14 hours in the tractor trailer, it doesn't leave much time for writing, But what I did do is I had a burning passion to keep this story in my head and in my heart, because I knew it was going to help a lot of people. I knew I had to get it out there to benefit them. So that's what drove me to the keyboard, to get it out of my head and onto the computer screen. Okay. Now, I had an overview of the plot and the premise, and I went with that. As I was writing it, I found out that the characters and the events themselves seemed to take a life of their own. So I sort of went with the flow. Okay. This is a self-published project with a company called Global Summit House, a very good publishing company, self-publishing company out of New York. The whole project cost me about $750. I did my own editing. And for any of y'all out there who happen to be English majors, when you read this book, you'll quickly realize that I am not an English major. As a matter of fact, this is my second book. I hope to get better at writing and editing as I go. So hopefully by the time I get to number 5, it'll be worth reading. So, that's what my desire is. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to read to you exactly what's between the cover of that book, so that you'll have a more deeper interest, knowledge of it, and hopefully it'll drive you to the point where you might want to find out a little bit more about it. This is a unique story with the intent of showcasing how that even the worst of us The worst of our sins can be covered and redeemed by God's grace and love. Now, how do you get God's grace, love, and mercy for hypocrites and the worst among us? Well, you exploit it with a story of mass deception, uncontrollable sins of passion, careless disregard for forgiveness, and you neatly disguise it as the things that are common in an everyday marriage, even a Christian marriage. Such is the case of Wanda and John, a hypocritical couple whose lives both become unraveled as they both embark on different but equally destructive paths of deception. Their marriage was the perfect cover for the out of control roller coaster ride that would plunge them separately into the depths of hell while they both were professing to be on the road to heaven. A few bad decisions was a catalyst that set things in motion that neither one of them could stop. Matter of fact, by the time they both realized that they were in over their heads, instead of trying to get out of hot water, they dove in even deeper with unforeseen consequences. A closet Christian couple allowed their inner demons to surface in their lives and get in the driver's seat and take them down separate roads to destruction that would exploit their soul and lead them in a drift in a sea of deception. As they move closer to the brink of total destruction, the unforeseen circumstances that they find themselves in serves as the orchestrated hand of God, who actually has other plans. So, if you're a sinner, if you're thinking about sinning, if you're covering up sin, or if you're even a total basket case, such as someone I know, then this book is for you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all I have for you this evening. It has been a pleasure of honoring for you to honor me with your time. If there's any other questions I can answer for you, I'd be happy to do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eugene. That was wonderful. We do have at least one question. There's a comment that says it's so great to hear you, and somebody's definitely going to get your book. That's Becky. Let's see. The question is, we've never asked you this question. Besides God himself, who was your biggest influence throughout life? Either who prompted you to write or otherwise?
Well, who prompted me to write was a lady named Mrs. Larietta Ward. She took a lot of time invested in me. The writing process, I was supposed to speak to her every Wednesday for about an hour, and I sat in her office every Wednesday kind of stone-faced. And one day she came in there and I sat down, my arms crossed, and she said, "Eugene, I'm not going to talk to you. I don't want you to talk to me." She slid a yellow piece of legal pad in front of me and a pen. She says, "I want you to talk to this pad." She gets up and walks out. And I'm sitting, okay, well, she's going to be back. Well, 10 minutes later, she didn't come back. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I can't do another hour just like this. So I picked up the pen, I put my name at the top of it, and I said something like, "Eugene Coghill, this is my day, and this is what I'm feeling." And for the next 45 minutes, I vented out everything that I had going on inside. And I realized that was a non-threatening, non-intimidating way to talk. So she probably invested more energy in me than any other person. She's, speaking of that 50-mile ultra marathon, at 4:30 in the morning, she put me in her car, drove me about an hour and a half away to that ultra marathon, listening to classical music, which just put me to sleep. But the fact that she did that made such an impression on me, and I didn't want to let her down.
That's great. The question is, what is the name of the book and where can he find it?
It is called A Loving Deception. It's available on Amazon.com. But actually, if you go to my website, eugenecoghill.com, I prefer you to get it there. There's a link to it, and it'll take you directly to Global Summit House sales page there. It's called A Loving Deception, eugenecoghill.com, and you'll see the link for the book.
And we will be sharing all that information too at the end of the program as well. Someone else has said, "I enjoyed hearing your story, so inspirational. How did you choose your publisher?"
Well, I I had published my first book with a different company called iUniverse, and it was a learning experience for me. And I learned to ask more questions. And as a result, I did more research, more digging, and I went with Global Summit House because the person I spoke to on the phone was very honest with me and told me I didn't have to pay the prices that I paid with my first publisher. He said, look, we are strictly a publishing company. We're only interested in getting your book, assembled, written, the cover design, and out there. He said, it doesn't cost, a couple $1,000s that a lot of people are paying to get a book self-published. And with his honesty and sincere desire for me to have a quality product at a lower price, I realized that that was probably the company I should go with. And it's been a very rewarding experience because it's higher royalties. They did great follow-up. They actually contact me on a regular basis to show me the marketing plan that they put together for me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Eugene. Thank you, the audience, for your questions. I'll be introducing our next speaker, but we will have a chance for more questions for all of the panelists. So if you think of something else, you can put it right into the chat. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and a virtual round of applause for Eugene. I know Eugene said earlier before we came live that he misses the actual interaction with the audience, which I know we all do, but we really appreciate your being here in the virtual world with us. So our next speaker is Lisa Braxton. Lisa is an Emmy-nominated former television journalist, an essayist, a short story writer, and a novelist. She's a fellow of the Coghill, I had practiced that too, Coghill Fiction Writers Program, and was a finalist in the William Faulkner Wisdom Creative Writing Competition. She earned her MFA in creative writing from Southern New Hampshire University, her MS in journalism from Northwestern University, and her BA in mass media from Hampton University. Her stories and essays have appeared in Vermont Literary Review, Black Lives Have Always Mattered, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and The Book of Hope. Lisa lives in Weymouth, and her first novel, The Talking Drum, published by Inanna Publications, has just been selected by Shelfbound magazine as this year's overall winner for its 2020 Indie Best Contest. So that's an exciting honor for Lisa. So please welcome Lisa Braxton.
Thank you, Lori, for that introduction. And thank you, Thayer Branch Library, for hosting me. I love the Thayer Branch Library. It's one of my favorite hangouts. I would drive over there almost every day, every other day after work. And sometimes the librarians would say, if I had not stopped in for a week or so, they say, what happened, Lisa? Did you leave town? I was always in that library. I also love the Thomas Crane Library in Quincy and the Weymouth Tufts Library in my town, Weymouth, and the Boston Public Library. So you get the general idea. I love libraries. And Eugene, I just wanted to say that I'm really interested in your story. It just sounds so intriguing with love and marriage and deception and roller coaster lifestyle and all that. Sounds very interesting. I'm looking forward to reading your book. And there's some of that in my book as well. My book, The Talking Drum, is about 3 young couples in the early 1970s and how they're affected when an urban development program takes over an immigrant neighborhood. It was a long, long process. My first manuscript, my first draft was finished in 2010, and we're here in 2020. And in May of this year, it got published. So it was a 10-year journey. And also it was a long, long journey to put together the characters and to shape and craft the characters of my novel. So I'll tell you a little bit about my characters. There's a husband and wife, they're newlyweds, and they're going to open a bookstore in this fictional city called Bellport. And it's right next to a neighborhood that's going to be taken for gentrification. And they think that they're going to benefit from this urban development project. There is their neighbor across the street who's a mover and shaker. He's kind of slick, one of these hip guys from the 70s, and he's a jack of all trades. He can do carpentry, he flips properties. He brags about knowing the mayor very well. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. And it's kind of unclear whether he's the kind of person that you can believe what he's saying, whether you can really trust him or not. And then he also runs a record shop, so he's also a business owner. Then there's his girlfriend who lives with him, who she's had a hard life. She's come up from the South during the 50s, and she had a very hard life. And she doesn't know whether or not she can trust her boyfriend or not. She has concerns that when he puts out that out to lunch sign at his record shop, she's wondering what he's really up to. She has a troubled daughter who's about 5 or 6 in this story, 5 or 6 years old. And she has meltdowns, tantrums, and she takes her little fists and she punches on her mother. And it's just unclear really early on in the story what is troubling her. There's also a strange man who's a Vietnam veteran who you never see him without his German Shepherd. And he pops up throughout the story every so often. But as you read it, you'll figure out why he's there. There's also an arsonist. There's someone who you don't really see, but you know that this person is doing something because these properties are being burned down. And whether he's just, he or she is a fire starter and enjoys starting fires or is doing them for some other reason, we don't know until you get into the story. There are also 2 drummers from Senegal, West Africa. They're in a group that they call the Fulani Sound, and they are very good hand drummers. They are very good looking, attractive, handsome, sexy men who make the women swoon when they do their presentations, when they do their performances. There is a restaurant owner who is from Senegal, and he is the mayor of that neighborhood that's going to be taken for gentrification. He wants to stop the project. He's an excellent cook, excellent chef, and he makes these wonderful West African dishes that you'll see mentioned in the story, and maybe make you go out and actually try to make these dishes yourself. So I wanted to be a novelist ever since I could read. I would sit in my room on nice sunny days and be reading my Nancy Drew mysteries or Little Women or Harriet the Spy or any of these different stories. And my mother would say to me, Lisa, go out and get some fresh air, go out and play with the kids in the neighborhood. And I would say, no, Mommy, I want to just stay in here and read. I was a voracious reader and I wanted to become a novelist. And I said to her, my mother, I want to become a novelist when I grow up. And she said, well, Lisa, that's really good, but you can't earn a living writing novels. And that made me rather sad. But then I thought, well, as I was growing up, I said, well, to be practical, maybe I could learn journalism and that would help me to write a novel. So in high school, I was on my high school newspaper. I went to college at Hampton University, majored in journalism, became editor of my college newspaper. Then after that, I went to work for a newspaper as a newspaper reporter for several years. And I learned how to work on deadlines, how to write quickly, how to write creatively, and how to work with editors and how I could understand that editors would make your work even better. I had a great time. I became a TV reporter also at some point, TV news anchor and reporter. And I got to meet celebrities. I got to meet politicians, the movers and shakers of that particular town, wherever I was working. I worked in different parts of the country. And I won some awards for my journalism. But even so, there was this desire to write a novel, to write creatively. But the problem was that I was so busy with journalism and it was so taxing and so draining and so labor intensive and mentally intensive that I didn't have time to work on a novel. So it wasn't until toward the end of my journalism career that I began to write some short stories. I wrote some short stories, I wrote some essays, and I got rejected over and over and over. And I was beginning to feel that maybe I didn't have what it took to write creatively. And so I kept setting up my stories. And this was before the internet. So I would mail my stories in, wait months and get these rejections, these little snippets, these little notes of form letter rejections. And I thought maybe I just don't have what it takes to write creatively. But finally, this one publication, a small literary journal in Georgia, accepted one of my stories. And once that happened, I thought, well, maybe I do have some talent with this. So I continued to write stories and I continued to get rejected, but sometimes I didn't get rejected. And eventually I said, well, I'm going to go back for a degree to learn how to write creatively because I would write stories and then I didn't know how to make them into longer stories to make a novel. So I enrolled at Southern New Hampshire University in their MFA program. And to graduate, we had to produce a novel. That was our thesis. So we had 2 years to produce a novel. Our professors helped us to understand that you can't watch TV 3 hours a night and write a novel. You can't spend your weekends out with your friends and write a novel. You have to sit in the chair and work on this novel. And you have to keep moving forward and write maybe 40 pages a week. And that's what I did. And it was not easy. It was not easy. It was tough. But at the end of the 2 years, I had my first draft of The Talking Drum. So after I got my first draft, I was a little bit delusional, because I thought, okay, now I've got my first draft. I've got my novel, I'm ready, and I'm going to get an agent, and I'll be shopped around to the top 5 publishing houses in New York. And then people are going to go to Barnes and Noble or Borders back in those days, before Borders was put out of business. And they're going to buy my novel. And that's what I did. I contacted agents and I got rejected. I can't tell you how many times. And they would say, oh, we like the first 30 pages. Let's see more. And I would send more. And they'd say, well, it's not for us, or it's not ready, or why would you start out your novel with this car scene, this driving scene? That's kind of boring. My professor, I would talk to him, and he would say, well, take what they're saying, if it's good advice, and use that advice to keep revising your novel as you go. So I did that. But then after a while, after some years are going by, and something that Eugene was saying about, I kept thinking I was going to die before I got this done. So I said, I've got to, I'm not that young anymore. I've got to hurry and get this thing done. I said, I'm going to use this spaghetti against the wall technique. I'm just going to blast everybody with this manuscript. So I was contacting agents. I was contacting small presses of all kinds, and just sending it out there, hoping that somebody would have mercy on me and actually want to publish this thing. This went on for some more years. And then I was going to conferences and meeting with editors and publishers there. Nothing was happening good. Then I went to a conference, the Association of Writers and Writing Programs conference. It was held in Washington, D.C. in 2017. They have a book expo. And at that book expo, there are small press publishers. The expo was about the size of, let's say, a football field. And there were these 7-foot tables at each place. So you can imagine how many that were there. I put my comfortable shoes on and I walked around to every single publisher and talked to them all. The second day, I got to the back of the room and there was a Canadian publisher. And I was thinking, well, they're Canadian. They're not going to be interested in my book. So I talked to her anyway, because I was getting, no pickup up until that point. And so she said, after I gave her my elevator speech, she said, oh, your book sounds interesting. Why don't you mail me a copy of it? And I said, all 364 pages? And she said, yes. So I went to work and I had them make the copy for me. And work, if you see this, I did pay for the copy, although I don't work there anymore. But anyway, so I had this copy made, went to the post office, filled out the international form, the whole thing, mailed it. And that was, I guess, around March of 2017. And then July of 2017, I got an email from her saying, my board of directors loved your book and we want to publish you. I was so excited. Then I read further and I said, we want to publish you in 2019, the fall of 2019. I'm thinking, the fall of 2019, that's over 2 years from now. But I said, well, I have to be thankful that they're going to publish me at all. So I was really thrilled. Then the fall of 2019, I heard nothing at all. And I emailed the editor and I said, well, what's going on? And she said, you didn't get my email? I said, no. And she said, we've had budget cuts and we're going to have to cut out some of the other authors, but we're going to publish your book, but it'll be in the spring of 2020. And I said, oh my goodness, the spring of 20, now I have to wait even longer. And so then spring of 2020 comes around and then COVID hits. And so that's another series of issues. And I'm thinking, well, how am I going to get people to be interested in my book when everything is shut down? But I can explain the rest of that during the question and answer period. So that's my story. And that's how my novel, The Talking Drum, got published.
Thank you, Lisa. 2020 just did us all in. Whoops, you stopped right before the timer went off.
Oh, perfect.
I had a question for you. I don't think we have any yet in the chat, but I was wondering if you could explain the Talking Drum title.
The Talking Drum is, there are two reasons for that. The Talking Drum is the name of the bookstore that the young couple decides to open. The husband was a professor. He didn't get tenure at his university. He quit academia. He comes back to his hometown with his bride, And he's very up on the Black militant topics, the Black arts movement, the Black Power movement. And he feels that he wants to call this place, this cultural center and bookstore, the Talking Drum, because in African villages, the talking drum, the drum was used to communicate, to let people know about rites of passage, marriages, or the birth of a child, to get together for a meeting, those sorts of things. And then also with the African drummers I mentioned, the very good looking and attractive African drummers who are in the book. One of them plays the African drum very well. It's a certain kind of a drum that's played with a mallet. It's held under the arm, and you squeeze it, you play with the mallet, and it sounds like it's talking. And so this duo that play the drums, one, my main character, Omar, he cannot play the talking drum very well. But his partner, Kadeem, plays it very well, and the women just throw themselves at Kadeem. And so Omar is jealous of that. But that is the reason for the talking drum. Those are the two references.
Great, thank you. Oh, let's see. Who's that? Got a dog barking. There's a few comments and compliments in the chat. Another Inanna author, Donna Decker, she loved your book. Michelle, such a journey. Lisa, your perseverance is amazing. Lisa from Willie, your book was great. I love bantering in a book, I think. And does Lisa have any plans for another book from Carlene? Do you have any plans for
Yes,
another
I am working on another book, also historical fiction, but much further back in the 1850s, taking place in Boston and involving abolitionists and runaway slaves and free African Americans in a certain neighborhood of Boston. So I'm about 100 pages in, and I'm looking forward to pivoting from the talking drum to this new one and really getting that. I'm hoping by next year to get that next one done.
That's great. And then Donna also mentioned she especially loved the bookstore in the book and the older couple. Surprised her in the end.
Yeah, they were fun. They were fun to write.
All right, well, we will come back with other questions. If you think of them, put them in the chat. I want to move us on to our last speaker because we did start a little bit late, so I want to make sure he has plenty of time also. So our next speaker is Paul Yovino, but he writes as PJ Yovino. Braintree author Paul Yevino grew up in Quincy on land that was once owned by John Adams beside Peace Field, the National Historic Site and home of two presidents, John Adams and John Quincy Adams. He believes this proximity led to his early interest in history and politics. He is a graduate of Thayer Academy in Braintree, where John Cheever, also a well-known writer, began his formative years, and the University of Massachusetts. He also attended Suffolk Law School, and he spent most of his career in the broadcasting industry. And his great love is radio broadcasting, where he has been both on-air host and executive producer. So writing as PJ Yovino, Paul's debut novel is titled Portals, and he published it in 2020 through Amazon KDP. So please welcome Paul Yovino.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you very much. Tough act to follow between Eugene and Lisa. So many similarities between what you said and getting your book published and all. Just for a quick reference, you mentioned Thayer, and they say there are really no coincidences in life. I dedicated the book to Peter Benelli, who I had as an English teacher, who eventually became headmaster at Thayer. And we lost him 7 years ago today, which I think is kind of, there are no coincidences. And in a way, he is one of the reasons probably that I always wanted to write, and I did. Now this goes back about 12, 13 years ago. I lost a close friend of one of my classmates at Thayer, and I wrote a memoriam for him, which appeared in the Thayer magazine, and didn't think much of it. And about a month or so later, after it was published, I got an email back, and all it said was, where did you learn to write like that? Which was like the A I never got in his class. And I've saved that. And I wrote back to him very quickly and said, look in the mirror. So with that little background, Portals is a historical novel that covers the critical days between the assassination of JFK, November 22nd, 1963, and a mere 9 months later, August 2nd, Sunday, August 2nd, 1964, when the alleged Gulf of Tonkin incident happened that precipitated our entrance into Vietnam with all the consequences of that, and how that changed the direction of a generation of people. And in this case, the main character, David Catalan, goes back to King Ridge Academy, not to be confused with any other school, it's all fiction. And the memories flood back. And he remembers the exact day being on campus, the day that he had heard that Kennedy was assassinated. And with that, I'd like to read the preface to the book, which I think will summarize basically where the book is going. So portals, as I said, are a large or imposing doorway or a gate or other entrance providing access to the world. And the prologue begins with just a notation to the British poet Wilfred Owen, who I said was correct in 1917 when he wrote Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, the big lie then and now. I would suggest that maybe people might want to look up for the still powerful 100-year-old poem. So the prologue begins. Look at that, I said to some freshmen as we walked out of Baker Hall under the bell tower portico. People are forming a circle around the flagpole. Maybe Jess is in there, I thought. I heard a whisper and then a roar of an American hymn as I ran down to the flagpole. The hymn rose like the incense the priest uses at the Holy Thursday Mass before the altar is stripped for Good Friday. It enveloped me like a warm hug as I melted into the crowd. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside me and guide her. As I got closer, the words got clearer and louder. Through the night, with the light from above, from the mountains, to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. No, Jessica. Where is Jess? Parker Bennett, our senior class bugler, was at the base of the flagpole. He raised the bugle to his lips. Taps. Someone else lowered the flag, half staff. My emotions, over the top. Like everyone else, tears flowed down my cheeks and I tasted the salt on my lips. The President of the United States was dead. John F. Kennedy, JFK, was assassinated. Crying? We should have been screaming. Part of my youth, part of all our youth died today on a street in Dallas. This Sunday, there will be no resurrection. A few weeks before, Mr. Hancock, our AP history teacher and distant relative to John Hancock, a big signer of the Declaration of Independence, had taken my class to the Brattle Street Theater to see the old movie Casablanca, believing an educated person had to see this movie to understand all that needs to be understood about World War II and war itself. I'm glad he did. As I stood there by the flagpole, I felt I was part of the movie. Instead of singing La Marseillaise to drown out the Nazi officers singing Deutschland über alles in Rick's Cafe, we stood by the flagpole singing God Bless America, defying the evil that had just happened in Dallas. But where was my Ilsa? Where was my Jessica? Where was my Paris? We left the quad, linked arm in arm. We left. We left in defiant silence. Well, that's the prologue. And that brings you right back to November of 1963. And the rest of the book, David has gone back for his 50th reunion. And then it's like the brick walls of the academy held all his memory. And now he was relating to them like a gift or a curse. And he relates the story of basically three of his friends whose lives have been changed in one way or another. They walk through these portals of life. Their fathers had all had experiences in World War II, and those experiences carried forward into the present day and changed their lives, changed the direction. Will's, the main character, finds out that his own father came back from World War II, shell-shocked as they called it then, and killed himself shortly after he returned. And Will's is always trying to, he has the negatives of what his life was for the short time, and he tries to put them all together. And the other one, Bo, is a student who lives on campus, and he is from New Orleans, or Nolans, as he said, and he Cajun, and his Cajun accent is as sweet as the sugar cane that grew on his family plantation. And the events that his father went through, the critical events, will drastically change his life. And finally, the love of David's life, Jessica Lindstrom, the things that her father did, basically trying to return much of the Nazi artwork stolen by the Nazis during World War II, that carried forward into present day, so much so that people are after him to get the artwork, and his life is so much in danger that he seeks sanctuary, and of all places, the Norwegian embassy in London. So a good part of the book takes place in London and all the consequences that happen there. And then it eventually comes back into the Boston area. You will read parts of the book and you'll find it very familiar. The author is really enthralled with automobiles. As I say to people, the characters are fictional, but the cars are real. There's a 1959 Ford Country Squire that plays a really critical part of the book. And all the way through, you're going to see different automobiles, a Riviera, a 1963 Riviera. And if you're familiar with that era, it was a very distinctive car, and that plays a significant part. There's only one true part of the story. I grew up in that era, and being a teenager during that period of time, it was a Friday night when Kennedy was assassinated. We didn't stay home. And one of the things we did have to do was to read Lord of the Flies, which oddly enough had just come out in the movie, the original Lord of the Flies. And so a group of us decided to go into Boston to see the movie, since we had to read it. And the movie was at the old Kenmore Square Theater in Kenmore Square. And it was a very warm November 22nd, 1963. So we go in, the streets are deserted. We come out of the movie, and there's been a weather inversion. The warm air below and the cold air above, and probably the moisture coming off the Charles River, had caused a fog in Kenmore Square. Now, you all know that there's now the Citgo sign in Kenmore Square, but back in 1963, it was city's service, and the neon was green. So maybe you see where the story is going. We come out of the movie theater. Kenmore Square is so deserted you could sit on the street and not get hit by a car. And there was a green fog, a green pall hanging over Kenmore Square, like the weather gods themselves were crying over the assassination of JFK. So that actually started as a short story, which I couldn't get published either. And so it expanded over probably a 2 or 3 year period. I'd sit here at my computer and right? You can't watch 3 hours of television, Lisa, and get anything done. But I don't know about you, but for me, the time, sit at the computer and the time just flies by. And all these characters who I no idea existed, you know, they say the muses create these characters, and I think they do. Someone said, where did they come from? Well, the muses, I guess. And someone else also advised me, write till you stop. And so the book is quite large. You can use it as a doorstop or a weight. But anyway, so that's the story of Portals.
Thank you, Paul.
Sure.
We have a couple of questions, but you've kind of answered some of them. One of the questions has to do with the characters. How close are they to your real life classmates? And the other question, somewhat connected, is the book semi-autobiographical? So if you want to answer.
Yeah, as to autobiographical, they say write from what you know. So there's some settings that are probably autobiographical, but it's 99% fiction. As I said, the only true event, and if you read it, there's a whole chapter of going to Boston on the expressway the night Kennedy was killed. That is sort of autobiographical. But as to the characters, pretty much fiction. The character from Louisiana is definitely fiction. There's a character from Norway who enters the book in London, and that's pure fiction. Jessica is unfortunately pure fiction. And as Will is pretty much all fiction. So it's fiction.
Okay. There was a compliment, Jeff, I was mesmerized by your novel. Were there some literary influences that inspired you?
Yeah, very much so. I was a Separate Piece. I don't know if you've ever read A Separate Piece, but I was always enthralled by that book. And so that is that sort of grounded me of where I wanted to take the book, because that was a retrospective, a look back. The main character does go back for I guess is a reunion, and he relates what happened to him. And there were some tragedies in the story, and there are in my book as well. I can't say that there's a happy ending. And
well, don't give away the ending.
No, I agree. I won't. But there may be a sequel in there somewhere.
Okay, that was the other question I was just going to get to. Will there be a sequel? So, are you working on it yet, or are you focused on?
Well, I'm working on another idea, and I think, as I told Laurie, I'm kind of formatting in my brain and making a general outline of a different tact to the Coconut Grove fire, and to see if there's a book in there. But Portals keeps bringing me back, because all these characters are still there and they're still hanging. And frankly, I want to know what happened to them. I mean, I created these people, and now they're just sort of out there in the atmosphere, and inquiring minds like mine want to know, where do they go? So
Well,
I would
I'll
my
put in
money
a
on
plug
Portal.
for put in a plug for the library's writers group, which Paul is a member of and a regular attendee. And maybe Eugene and Lisa also have written in the writers group or had some feedback from readers before you submit.
Well, I have gone to a couple of the Braintree Thayer branch writers group meetings. I did do that. And also one thing that I did was I was looking for some feedback when I was in the throes of feeling like the Talking Drum would never get published. I went on to meetup.com and I found the South Shore Writers Group. And we would meet once a week and read pages to each other and critique each other's work and get feedback. And I got some good feedback that my novel, they said it sounded publishable. So finding that group on meetup.com was a very good thing for me.
Lisa, one thing you said, and our expectations are probably really not realistic. when I finished the book, I thought, sure, I'll flood all the agents and I'll soon be on the New York Times bestseller list. And I look at that every Sunday and I say, what did they do that I'm not doing? There must be a secret password somewhere that gets you in there, and I have yet to discover it. But thank God for Amazon, because I think these literary agents, this is being very critical of them, I think they're missing a major segment of novelists who are now so frustrated by the fact that agents, put them in the circular file. There's a lot of fine writers out there whose work may never see the light of day, but thanks to Amazon and small publishers, they are.
Yeah, I must say for myself, I was very fortunate just recently to being contacted by a literary agent, and they are working tirelessly. They're pitching my book to 2 or 3 traditional publishers right now down in New York City, and I'm hoping to land a contract, something in ink, by the first part of this year. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, congratulations.
That's
Well,
great.
if you look at any of the agents' list, and you have to really be specific, pairing yourself with an agent that wants, in my case, an historical novel, and you try to do that.
Paul, I'm gonna break in because I don't want us to go over. I just wanted to mention in the comments, that was actually something that Fred Pagori, who was one of our previous authors on this program, said all 3 authors wrote books publishers made errors by not grabbing them up. So rejections are not strangers to me. The only solution is to persist. So I just wanted to pass that on for all the writers out there in the audience as well. I want us to make sure I have a chance to open it up to questions for everyone before, because we could get into the nitty gritty and talk about literary agents all the rest of the night. Right? Does anyone have any questions for the whole panel? I think we may have had, there was one for Eugene that we didn't get to earlier, which was, do you see any relevance of your book to current events? And that actually could go for all. If Eugene, you want to tackle that one?
Yes, actually, I do. I think, especially when we look at how our lives are interacting right now with this COVID and everything, we kind of question our own journey, our purpose here and stuff like that. I think my book will resonate with giving people a bigger sense that there's something, there's hope out there. There's hope. And if we connect to it, regardless of the circumstances that are going on in our lives, we can all move forward.
Great. I just was sharing Eugene's information for if you're looking for his book, A Loving Deception by Eugene Coghill, and you can find it on Amazon. Lisa, did you want to answer about the current events? You wrote your book set in the 70s, but do you find it has current relevancy?
Yes, I do have a storyline in my book about how the people of one neighborhood are, they have their first Black police officer, because there's been some police brutality, and the citizens who are concerned about that were protesting at City Hall, and they said, we need some representation. We need to have some Black officers on the force. We're tired of this police brutality. And so this officer is featured in the book. And someone who interviewed me a few months ago said, it seems so timely. When did you write this book? And I said, well, I started writing this back in 2010 was when I finished the first draft. And sure enough, the Black Lives Matter movement came to the fore again at the time earlier this year. And it was fitting, but I was saying that these issues don't go away. These issues that we've been concerned with, our society's been concerned with, don't go away. They didn't just happen last year or this year. They've been ongoing for some time. So that's something that it seemed like I wrote this based on the headlines, but no, that these issues with police brutality and things of that nature have been a concern for some time. So I just happened to write this at the time that this really got a lot of attention because of current events.
Yes, great, thank you. I just wanted to also show Paul's. So Lisa's is available through Amazon as well, and other bookstores, and maybe even our local Barnes and Noble.
BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com and Nana Publishing. You can go to my website, lisabraxton.com, for more information.
Great. And Paul, you want to respond to the current events question?
Yeah, I suppose in the sense that life is unpredictable, and I think that comes through there. The expectations that all of these characters had from the high school years to real life are things that we all experience, and we sometimes have no control over what direction that will go. And as to it being, we're coming up to the 60th anniversary of Kennedy's assassination. So maybe in a sense that will reignite people's interest in the area. But I think it's still a period of, in my own opinion, very quickly, I don't think we've ever really recovered from the assassination. And I think a lot of the problems political we have today are still go back to November 22nd, 1963.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate this. We've hit our 8 o'clock deadline. I just want to say thank you to our 3 speakers tonight: Eugene Coghill, who spoke about his new novel, A Loving Deception; Lisa Braxton, who spoke about her new novel, The Talking Drum; and Paul Yovino, who spoke about his new novel, Portals. It was great to have 3 novelists on the panel tonight, and you all did a wonderful job, and we enjoyed hearing about your book. There was one last piece of advice in the comments: before you sign on the dotted line, check your contract and get the best you can. So
Yes, thank you. I will do.
Good idea.
So on that note, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of Thayer Public Library to our speakers and to our audience tonight. There's one last comment: excellent presentations by all participants.